Hello and welcome to Davos 2011. We've spoken with business leaders, political leaders, and now let's get an investing view for across the world. I'm joined by Pagliuca, the Managing Director of BAIN Capital. Steve, thanks very much for your time. Give me a sense of what you're picking up in terms of the macroeconomic factors, and then we'll talk a little bit about what that means for investing across the world, where the growth spots are.
Great, fantastic. Well, macroeconomically, the big discussion here in Davos is really the trade-off between the developing world and the old economies.
Right.
And it's a huge set of issues here with India and China on one side of the debate and the U.S. and Europe on the other side.
Well, last year, I remember India was, amongst the most favored destinations. It was a very hot topic here in Davos. Several companies and investors across the world were very keen on investing in India. This year, we're seeing some re-emergence of growth in the U.S. We're seeing Europe show some signs of stability. Do you see a large number of the investments that were maybe headed towards India now get redirected to other parts of the world?
Well, it's a complicated question. I think, first of all, at BAIN Capital, we're more microeconomists, not macro. We come to get the macro view, but we look at every business, it stands on its own right. So it kind of doesn't matter the markets it is in. Can it gain share? Can it be transformed? Can it be a great company? That being said, there's still a huge amount of growth in India and China. That's an exciting area to invest. We're seeing signs of life in Europe and the U.S. as well. The key issue for the globe is this imbalance of both trade and these deficits. The developing countries don't have deficits, but Europe and the United States are struggling with large deficits. Tim Geithner just spoke here and talked about a plan to get the deficit down in the United States. That will make the United States a very attractive place to invest, give us stability, and hopefully that will happen.
So do you see any redirecting of funds, not just for BAIN, but across the private equity space, of funds back to the U.S. as people feel that it's an environment we're comfortable in, we understand the regulatory structures, why not invest in the U.S. and be getting the same kind of growth?
I don't see redirecting. I see probably growth, stabilization in the U.S. and growth in investing in India and China. India specifically, if it's welcoming foreign capital, there's been some issues with foreign capital in India.
Yes.
If they really welcome that, like China does, I think that could really help their economy. You've got a lot of infrastructure to do there. You've got great companies, great people, great ideas. So if the right policies are put in place, it could be a hotbed for private equity.
All right, I'm going to talk about the India issues in just a bit because there are several of them. But before that, how do you measure the liquidity situation across the private equity world right now? How much cash is being deployed? How much is sitting on the sidelines? And do you believe there's enough business confidence through the course of 2011, or at least the signs of it, that money will be put to use this year?
I think money will be put to use this year. We're seeing more and more opportunities, attractive opportunities. It's a big global market out there, and so there will be opportunities put to use. The overhang of money is not that big an overhang historically. There's always been money and there's always been investment, so I don't see that as a large issue.
So there isn't that much money sitting on the sidelines, according to you?
I don't think so. I see active deals being done. There are several funds. Blackstone just raised a fund. Other funds have dry powder for a couple of years. So I think money is being put to use.
Okay, give me a sense of how investors in private equity are reacting in terms of making money available. We've been through a very difficult set of 3 years. Is fundraising easy to come by right now? Is there enough money to deploy? Are you looking at raising fresh funds to deploy across the world?
We have funds we raised a couple of years ago, so we have plenty of funds right now. We consider areas every year. We make a new fundraising.
Did you put a number to it, roughly speaking?
We don't put a number to it. We look at the environment. We figure out how much money is needed, how much can we productively invest for our investors.
Okay.
And private equity has changed. I've been involved in the last 20 years.
Right.
It started out as a very small cottage industry. Now it's a global industry. And the key to private equity is adding value to the companies. And especially for these emerging economies, they need more than money. They need some of the management practices, some of the advice on growth, strategic direction, and private equity has been good at developing that product.
Okay, let me talk about India now. How do you view India in the current context of how attractive it remains as an investment destination? Not just because other economies are showing signs of growth, but also because in the last 6-8 months we've had several issues of poor governance, corruption, lack of forward movement on policy making. All of that come up.
Well, I think for now people are viewing the corruption as a blip on India. India has a rule of law and has systems to deal with that, and they are dealing with that. I would say the better they deal with that, the more confidence there'll be in investing in India. So I think it's a major issue for all economies. We went through a blip in the U.S. as well. Sarbanes-Oxley was the result of that blip.
Right.
So I'm sure India will respond to that as they do and stabilize that situation. India has tremendous growth potential for investment. You're building a huge middle class there. I was there in 1985. I was just there recently. The differences are amazing. What's happened. So I think it will be a good area to invest, but you've got to get the governmental policies and the stability to promote that foreign direct investment, and private equity can add there.
Do you think that there are maybe some sectors that you're now looking at negatively in India because of all the corruption graft stories that you've heard? For instance, the resource space. Or the infrastructure space. These are sectors that you don't really want to touch because you're not really sure what they're going to throw up in terms of, clean processes.
Well, what we do is we're really, again, we're microeconomists, and we have a very large staff and professional staff in India, and we look at every deal on its own right. So we'll do enough due diligence. That's our job, to figure out, are the numbers right? Is the situation right? So corruption is an issue. I think it can hurt your economy if you have corruption. Our job in the U.S. and Europe and India, China, is to make sure we are going into clean situations, to make sure we understand the numbers, to make sure we understand the plan, the management team, and we're aligned. That's our job to do that.
Okay, I know BAIN came to India a little while after KKR and Blackstone to that degree, but they seem to have been more aggressive in the Indian market. Is there some reason you're holding back on investments in India, or is it just that you take a longer period to finish due diligence and picking, cherry-picking the investments that you want to make?
We've always had a history of very prudently investing money, and so
I'm sure KKR and Blackstone will want to say the same thing.
They probably would, but we actually...
But they've been big on power, they've been big on infrastructure. We haven't seen that with BAIN. I know Amit's made a couple of investments in India, but we haven't seen great momentum in the investment making.
Well, we're patient investors. We're looking for great opportunities. We invest an awful lot of our own personal capital into the markets.
Sure.
So investing is always sporadic. You have to invest when you see good opportunities, and we've got a great staff. We're making a lot of progress, and we're very happy with what's going on in India.
Steve, does your investment outlook get impacted by the way the equity markets move, whether in India or elsewhere in the world, because that does impact valuations, especially in a family business-dominated environment like India? So if we have a year where the markets really don't move much, as is anticipated right now, does that make it a better investing environment for you?
Yeah, it's a complicated question, but in general, when public markets become overheated, that often spills over into private markets, whether it's India or any other country. So you have to be very careful that you don't want to invest on inflated valuations. But again, the key to that is looking at each company individually, figuring out what is going to be a reasonable exit valuation at the end, and figuring out how you can transform that company and help that company grow, whether it be in India, whether it be globally. So again, the key to this business is look at a company that's on right, try to come up with a plan for it to grow. If you believe it can grow and generate revenues and generate more profits and become stronger strategically, you can make that investment, and you have to put the right exit multiple, normalize it for the up years and the down years. With a normalized exit, you can do very well.
All right, we're in the first year of a new decade. Where do you see most of the private equity money going over the course of the next 10 years? Do you have sectors or areas or industrial spaces that you think will be the big hot sectors of the next 10 years? And nations, of course, will it be emerging markets, or do you think the money is now going to get equally divided across the world as we see growth come back?
Private equity is now, I think it has many more years of growth left into it. It's going to follow the development of world economies. So as a percentage of GDP, it's a great model. It's a great model for liquidity to actually take companies from an early stage to a middle stage to a later stage. It's a great model to help transform companies that need some transformation that are not appropriate for the public markets. So private equity is proven to work in every country.
Absolutely.
It's going to follow GDP. And I believe the model is even more important if you look at developing countries, because it helps turbocharge those companies and bring in skills that we've learned from doing it for many years.
Okay, final question. What could upset your outlook for the world this year? Are you factoring in any kind of big upset in Europe with regards to maybe Spain and Portugal this year? Or do you think that maybe even the U.S., because of entrenched joblessness, could be facing a return on the road of recovery? What are you working in terms of the big risks into your
Well, we try to look at again, the 80-20 is to look at the company itself and how it's impacted by these various risks, and pressure test that to see if it can withstand a down period. So we try to finance companies so they can withstand several types of risks.
Right.
And certainly everyone in the private equity industry is sensitive to that, given we had a kind of the 100-year storm with the financial crisis in 2008.
Right.
So the private equity companies have, I think, emerged smarter and even better than they were before in terms of figuring out how to do capital structures that will withstand those kinds of risks. In terms of those risks, thank goodness Spain is a small part of the European GDP. Germany is doing very well. Everyone's focusing on making that region come back and stabilizing Ireland and Spain. So we hope for the best. We prepare for the worst for those kinds of scenarios. So our financing is such that we'll get through that kind of a period. But hopefully they'll pull it together like they did in the United States, get those countries back on track. Again, the big picture issue is the Western countries that have run deficits for too long, built up large national debts. You've got to get a path back to stability to pay off those debts.
What about the regulatory risk? I know last year we were talking about what impact that could have on private equity. We've seen the Frank Dodd bill come through since then. Do you believe that the regulatory environment has changed dramatically at all? Because it doesn't seem to have had any impact on private equity.
We've been a registered investment company at Bain Capital, and in a funny sort of way, everyone said Sarbanes-Oxley was going to destroy corporate America. It didn't. Maybe some of those regulations were not necessary. The best part of that was putting in a thing where the CFO and CEO had to sign that the statements were correct. That really helped the situation.
Right.
This new set of regulations, again, is going to call for more transparency. We believe in transparency. So it helps the good companies. It doesn't hurt the good companies.
All right, Steve Pagliuca, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It was
for
great to
joining
be here
us on
again.
CNBC TV 18.